Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're exploring a deeply psychological, graphic novel-style narrative that maps the absolute darkest, most desolate corners of the human mind. Now, to truly understand this cautionary tale of extreme psychological repression, I'm not just going to read to you. Instead, I'm going to step right into the spectral armor of our subject. I am the Pale Inquisitor, a monastic warden of a mental wasteland. So prepare to walk with me into the shadows of a psyche that has literally declared war on itself.
Okay, let's dive right into this festering wound of imperfection that we call the human condition. My core belief, my agonizing mandate really, is exactly this. The soul is a messy draft that must be edited down to a single blank page. When I look out at the human soul, I don't see beauty in all its chaotic noise. I see a deadly contagion. I see a draft filled with biological static, unseemly desires, and wildly unpredictable impulses. It has to be redacted. It must be scoured, edited, and erased until absolutely nothing remains but a pristine blank page of total purity.
But this brings us to a terrifying precipice. What happens when the intense desire to be perfect destroys the very soul it's trying to save? I want you to really ask yourself that as we journey deeper. Because this is the central tragedy of my existence. I am a mind so utterly doomed by its own obsessive pursuit of absolute purity that it's willing to annihilate its own humanity just to achieve it. Act 1. The Geometry of Stagnation.
Walk with me through these spiritual borderlands. As a spectral judge, my armor is permanently etched with the names of my failed ancestors. It's a constant, heavy reminder of the weakness I have to excise. My robes, they're woven with iron filings, practically magnetic, so they constantly attract the heavy, suffocating debris of human failure. My world is entirely one of stagnation. We start our journey here, drifting above the iron bridge, which is this cold structure of completely inflexible morality. Then I approach the shattered gate, right where the dense gray mist of the soul's deepest boundaries meets utter nothingness. And finally, I stand at the threshold of the void itself. You see, I am an anti-Galahad. I'm not seeking the holy grail of enlightenment. I'm seeking a total spiritual vacuum. And lurking right there in the gray mist of that shattered gate is the silver wolf. Now, in psychological terms, this is the id, the primal instinctual self. It embodies raw hunger, wildness, and all that chaotic noise I mentioned earlier. I don't see this wolf as a natural part of the self that needs to be integrated. No way. I view it as a deadly contagion that directly threatens my perfect silent geometry. I am duty-bound to eradicate it.
Act 2. The Scourge of Subtraction. To really understand my reality, you have to understand my psychological role. I'm not a healer. I am the necrotic superego. Basically, I'm the personification of absolute law, pushed to a completely destructive, paralyzing extreme. A healthy superego gives you moral guidance, right? But a necrotic one? It provides only death. I am the physical embodiment of rules so unimaginably rigid that they demand purification through the complete subtraction of the self. And how exactly do I pull this off? Well, I use a few tools. I toll a spectral bell to mark and, frankly, celebrate the death of every spontaneous thought. I use a brutal internal scourge to physically and mentally punish even the slightest shadow of a doubt. And I carry around a heavy ledger, written entirely in the dark ink of regret, where I meticulously record every forbidden impulse and disharmonious desire that bubbles up from that silver wolf. All of this brilliantly illustrates my alignment with the classic tragic heroes of antiquity. My noble intent, total spiritual purity, a goal of true holiness and order. But my fatal flaw is my scrupulous, blinding obsession with complete self-erasure to achieve it. And here's the tragic irony. My relentless, punishing pursuit of purity is the exact fire that sustains the darkness. The harder I try to erase the silver wolf, the more violent, starved, and incredibly dangerous those id-driven instincts become. Act 3. The Pulse of the Emerald Cross. Then, at the edge of the void, I find an emerald cross. It absolutely does not belong in my world of leaden finality. It pulsates with this terrifying, primal energy, yet, paradoxically, it resonates perfectly with my own necrotic devotion. I reach out, I grasp it, and in this terrifying, explosive surge of power, it shifts. It stretches out into an emerald staff, glowing in a strange twilight hue. It's a color caught perfectly between the dying light of my rigid law and the absolute darkness of the abyss.
So, this is the turning point, the crucial psychological shift, the dark apotheosis. With this staff pulsing in my hand, my entire mandate fundamentally changes. As a spectral judge, I only wanted to erase the chaotic noise of the soul. But now, acting as a conduit for this twilight power, I realize something far darker. I no longer want to merely erase the contagion of primal desire. I realize I have the power to weaponize it. Act 4. The manifestation of the wild verdant. This chart's a deeply corrupted, really tragic version of Jungian integration. Normally, integrating the primal shadow brings wholeness and healing. Yeah, not here. Step 1, I violently repress the primal instincts. Step 2, using the staff, I forcefully weaponize those instincts, binding the chaotic wild growth of the wolf to my absolute law. And step 3 is the inevitable result. The psyche suffocates completely beneath this forced, unnatural synthesis.
Actually, this whole catastrophe can be explained with a pretty simple analogy. Just imagine an overzealous gardener who absolutely hates the wildness of nature. He prunes a tree all the way down to a dead, barren stump. Then, trying to force it to be perfect, he feeds it radioactive fertilizer. What happens? It doesn't heal or grow back pretty. It explodes into a violent, monstrous, chaotic overgrowth. That is exactly what happened to my domain. The wasteland wasn't healed. It was instantly overrun by suffocating, iron-thorned briars. Act 5. The Architect of the Overgrowth. Witness the stark contrast of my descent here. In my initial state, I possessed absolute order. Sure, it was stagnant, but it was geometrically perfect and completely silent. Now, think about my final state. Because I tried to weaponize the very instincts that I refused to accept, I am now trapped in chaotic overgrowth. I'm a prisoner of my own morality, completely entangled in a suffocating web of verdant iron that I created myself. These words, they're basically my epitaph. A singular, rigid tapestry forced into the shape of a grave. I've become whole, but in the darkest sense imaginable. I embrace the wolf, not to grant the soul its freedom, but to ensure that its wild noise is permanently silenced, crushed beneath the sheer, sprawling weight of my emerald law. My cage is made of living wood, but it will never, ever bloom. I now guard a throne that has been empty for an eternity, just waiting for the void to confirm my perfection. And so, I leave you with this final, provocative thought to really ponder. When the throne of the mind is entirely empty, when you have successfully strangled every wild, beautiful impulse, does the perfect, motionless line of duty become just another name for the ultimate fear of freedom? Consider the cost of your own internal rigidities, lest you too become an architect of the overgrowth.